Parents, you're in for a treat. I'm so excited for you to hear from my friend, Bryan Holyfield. Talk about faith, talk about family, talk about fitness. It is such a great resource. As parents, we are sleep deprived and stressed out, and he gives some amazing tips and tricks and things to do, some good skill sets for us to have to get better and to show up better. So here's my friend Bryan. Welcome to the Family Table. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with parents, caregivers, and family experts about the joys and challenges of family life. We'll share the stories, advice, and insights that will help you build a loving and resilient family. Pull up a chair and join us at the Family Table. Welcome, everybody, to the Family Table. I am so excited for you to pull up a seat at the table with me, Matthew Eford, your host, and my new friend, Bryan Holyfield. We're connected through Iron Forums. If you've listened to the podcast, you know about Iron Forums. But I'm so excited for you to hear about Bryan, his book that he's got, and the way that he serves in the Iron Forums community, but the way he serves his family and his businesses. So, Bryan, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself and your family. You know, what's your makeup there, and then also let's get into the business a little bit.
Yeah, Matthew, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Super excited to connect with you and your audience. But yeah, where to start? I was a Mississippi boy that ended up spending a lot of years in Moscow, Russia. My parents were missionaries there, so
Wow.
missionary kid background. So I got to see a lot of the world, and that helped me fall in love with history. But it's also helped me fall in love with my wife. And so she was a missionary kid as well, and you know, I like to joke that it was slim pickings over there in terms of American girls, but
Oh,
you
love
know,
that.
she is just an incredible godsend and blessing on me. And we started dating in high school, and we have been together ever since. So we are 15 years married. We have four boys. Our oldest is 13, and then we've got all the way down to a 2-year-old. So
Wow.
we got a nice little spread here, but.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, man. So we are really enjoying life right now, enjoying just serving in our local church. So we're part of a church plant up here in Lula, Georgia,
Okay.
and I own my own business, which is fitness and nutrition coaching, and coach all my kids' sports teams and doing all the dad stuff. So that's a little overview of kind of where we are in life. But and then Iron Forums as well. So I'm a local facilitator for one of the forums up here in Gainesville,
I
Indiana.
love that. Yeah, so my wife and I, Hannah, are high school sweethearts, and it's a fun thing to have seen. One of the things that we talk about a lot is that we grew and continue to grow, but we've grown so much throughout our dating, engaged, married life that we're used to growing as couples, and it's
Mhm.
just fun to kind of have that perspective instead of meeting later in life and then learning to grow together. It's fun to kind of go through
Yeah.
some of those key moments in teenage years, 20 years. So that's great. So
Yeah.
Bryan, talk to me about like your family. You're overseas, right? You're how long were you actually living in Russia?
Yeah, I was there for, let's see, um, 1999, so I was 10 years old, and then we stayed there. I stayed 1 year after I graduated, so I stayed until I was 19, so about a
Wow.
9 year stretch.
Yeah.
My
Wow.
family ended up being there for about 24 years, 8 years in Moscow, and then the last, I guess it would be 17 or so, 16 in Siberia. So very different.
Wow. Yeah. Sure. So talk to me about family memories, right? We kind of love to hear that
Yeah.
traditions. Um, Obviously you grew up a lot of your teenage years, or all your teenage years, in a different country, in a very
hmm
different culture. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I joke I had culture shock coming back to the US. But it was different because there was a lot of things that I could do over there. I mean, you're in a big city, there's public transportation. I could go across the city with my friends, and then you came back to the States and you know, 14, 15, and none of my friends could drive and we couldn't go anywhere and we had to let
Yeah.
parents drive us. And so that was kind of that was an eye-opening moment. But no, we had so many different experiences that we had as a family where we got to travel, see different parts of the world. One of my favorite trips we ever took was to Cyprus,
Okay.
and to see the catacombs and see like, you know, like okay, Paul was here and he probably preached like right over there. And then this is where like some of the early Christians hid out, you know, in the
Yeah. Cool.
catacombs, like hiding from persecution. And I mentioned a love for history. I was an educator for about 10 years. And I think traveling to these different places and seeing, in Poland, going to a Holocaust museum and like, ooh, wow,
Wow.
how, and going to all these different parts of the world and seeing these different experiences and understanding different cultures. I just appreciate my parents so much for exposing me to that because, my dad grew up on a dairy farm, my mom grew up on a chicken farm, and so it was like for them even it was
Sure.
eye-opening. So
Yeah,
I
sure.
got to experience that with them, and so that's one of the things that we try to include into our family chemistry is just um, we travel together or do mission trips together and try to make it an experience that they're going to remember for a long time.
I love that. I love that mission of being together and the experiences that you can give your kids. So this I normally kind of wait to end this type of question, but as a dad, I have four boys myself as well. What advice do you wish you would have had early on that you know now?
I think I think with my oldest son, I think that I don't. It's hard to say you're too hard on them.
Sure.
But I think you set these expectations like this is my son, it's my firstborn, and then I think sometimes you can pressure them too much in a way, and I really want to, and I think that the second son and then the third, it kind of softened up a little bit.
Okay.
And I think that would be the thing. Just be softer with them, especially in those formative years. I think it's easy to kind of, especially when they have younger siblings, to want them to be responsible. It's not a problem for your kids to be responsible, but an 8-year-old still is an 8-year-old. And I
Yeah.
think now I can see our third son who's about to turn 8. I can see like I don't put as much on him as I did my oldest son when he was that age.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's
and
great
I, and I
advice.
think and I think that it wasn't so much about making sure he was responsible as much as it was putting too much pressure on him. And I think that's an area that I would encourage young fathers to be aware of is that, you know, uh, it could show up in sports, it could show up in activities, it could show up in academics, it could show up in taking care of a younger sibling, that they're still a child and you have to understand where they are at that age. And
Sure.
and even if they're the oldest, it doesn't mean that they should have an undue amount of burden put on them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic insight, and I appreciate you sharing that. So, talk to me about, with that in mind, how would you go about what advice would you have about teaching your kids responsibility, teaching them independence, helping them grow and mature, and
Mm.
not maybe not so much in the faith perspective of discipling, but obviously that's a key part of this. But talk to me just about them as a young man. What
Mhm.
advice would you have to dads out there or parent or moms out there too?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite books for parenting is Raising Modern Day Knights, and
And
I
who's that
think
by? Do you remember?
I'm drawing a blank on the
That's okay.
author's name.
I'll
Yeah,
find it and I'll put it in the show notes.
it's fantastic. And one of the things that they talk about in the book, it's two gentlemen that wrote this book, and they've got a whole organization behind it. It's a fantastic approach to raising sons. Um, and one of the things that they really highlight is the lack of rites of passage
Okay.
in our modern society. And I think that, in decades gone and centuries past, there was a bigger emphasis on these thresholds. Like you've crossed this threshold and now you're entering into a new stage. And so they think of it like if you're training up a knight, that young boy gets selected, and then he has to serve as a squire, right? He has to serve at that lowest rung, but he's modeling himself after that knight. He has to serve that knight and do everything that the knight needs, but he sees how the knight behaves. He sees what's required to be a knight. And then he moves up and he graduates into these new stages. And so by the time he's ready to become a knight, he's not only seen it modeled for years, sometimes even, close to a decade, he's also lived through the different layers of responsibility
Yeah, I
that are
love that.
embedded into that. And so I think that it's important that when we're raising our kids, daughters as well, that there needs to be that moment. It's like, hey, you've reached a new level, and you can create those levels for yourself, but you celebrate it, you reward it, but you also say, now you're at this level, and these are the new expectations that we have.
Yeah.
We're preparing you, this stage, we're preparing you for that next level. And so you have that sense of anticipation of what's coming. And there's new benefits of that stage, but there's also new responsibilities. And they need to know this. We have to roadmap that for them so that they know what's coming because the world is going to hit them with stuff before they're ready.
Sure.
And unless they know that this is coming, then they don't have any, any skills or any like mental frameworks built up around it, and it just catches them for a loop. So,
Yeah, I love that. So talk to me about with your kids, right? What is one of those? Give us an example of kind of walk us through from beginning to end. What does
mhm.
it look like when you set up one of those big changes? Intentional Fatherhood by John Tyson's another book that kind of
Yeah.
helps lay out a lot of those that I highly recommend. But Brian, what have you found for your family? Give myself, the audience,
hmm
an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, I can just, highlight what I've done with our oldest. And at 10, me and him took a special trip. We took a
Cool.
special trip and we read a little book, and it was, I'm drawing a blank on it, but it is basically written for young boys.
Okay.
Hey, here's what's going to be happening in your life in the near future in terms of puberty, what to expect, your body changes, all this stuff. So we went and we just did some of his favorite things, and we went to a Lego
Cool.
convention, and we went to a ball game, and we did some of these things. It was just me and him for a full weekend, and so that was like his like initial threshold of like, okay, we're going to read this book together, we're going to discuss it, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it
Yeah.
comes to growing up and what to expect and and hey, you know, I'm going to open this conversation. I'm opening the door so that way you can feel free to walk through it when you're ready.
Cool.
And when things happen and you're not sure, is this normal? Is this okay? Is this right? Um, what do I do with these thoughts? You can approach me because I've already opened that door.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the focal point of that weekend. And then he just turned 13 back last year, and so we went on our kind of next trip.
Nice.
And this is the one of like, okay, now you're at the threshold of manhood, and here's where we're gonna start to. And this was just like off the rails. Just let's go have as much fun as we possibly can
Sure.
together, just father son. And so we didn't like do a book or study or anything like that, but it was like let's connect as young man to father, and let's just talk a little bit about hey, here's what's coming next.
I love that.
And so kind of setting him up, for what this later middle school years look like, and as he goes into high school, like these are the expectations within our family, and that God has on you, and that what are your goals? What are the things you want to work towards and build towards? And I think that's a pivotal point. At that age, they can start to help you create that vision and that roadmap.
Sure.
And so that's what I would encourage, and kind of when you hit that stage.
I love that. And so what is his next one? Do you have that mapped out already? What is his next one coming?
Yeah, kind of. Next thing is at 16 and then 18. It's kind of the next couple of bits. And I
I
haven't,
love that.
I'm creating it, and I've got a roadmap, I've got a model that I'm following, but at the same time, you kind of create it and make it your own.
Sure.
So until we get there, I don't really know exactly what that's going to look like, to be fully honest. But then the goal is to follow that pattern with our other three when they get to those levels as well.
I love that. So you're looking at 10, 13, 16, 18.
Yeah.
I think that just to kind of get that in front of the audience, right? I mean, it's not something you have to do every day. It's not something you have to do every week, but it's this moment of okay, let's close a chapter and let's open a new one.
hmm
And helping them open a new one, the rites of passage. I think that's fantastic. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah,
So
and I think well, we have kind of in our society we have certain okay, you get your driver's license and that's kind of considered one, or
sure.
you turn 18 and that's kind of considered one, but I think we can be more intentional than just what society builds in.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're serving your family that way. I think that's very admirable, and I look forward to doing that with my boys as well.
Now, how
So
old are yours?
so I go. Walker is 7. Noah would have been he would almost be 5. Warren no Abel is 4 and Warren is 2. And
Wow.
so yeah, it's we have a very lively household. It is very very loud. We're in a um, it's just we got some loud boys.
You're
So
in the thick of it. Yeah,
they
I
were in
get
the
it.
thick of it. It's very fun though. We love it. So talk to the dads that are out there that have, like for myself, talk to me, young boys that I know several people that listen to this that for whatever reason God's just given them all boys just like me. Um, what advice speak directly to that dad that's sitting here that they're all of their boys or their mix of they're all 10 and under.
Mm.
What advice would you have for them around this idea of kind of creating passages? You're looking to the 10-year-old. Is there anything that you would kind of go back and do pre-10, or what advice would you have there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go back and like plan it out a little bit more.
Okay.
You know, starting maybe around like a 7 or 8 year old age, and go ahead and kind of get the ball rolling and help them understand this is what's coming up. Kind of preempt it a little bit, kind of front load. Um, the other thing I would just recommend is stay physically active.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me that has opened a lot of doors with my boys in
Okay.
particular.
Okay.
Um, just have the capacity, take time, invest in your own health, invest in your own physical abilities, invest in your own hobbies. Because I think a lot of times when we have like in the situation that you're in, it can feel we can especially if you're trying to be an intentional dad, you can kind of guilt that time and think, well, I gotta kind of give up anything that I'm interested in,
Sure.
and then your life kind of becomes a reflection of them, but they don't have something to aspire to.
Yeah, that's a
And they don't
great
see
point.
you going out there and putting yourself out there and trying to learn new skills or trying to better yourself. And I think that's important for young boys to see their dad has drive. And I think it also prevents a lot of what we see. I'm in the sports world a lot, but we see a lot of dads that kind of they're still living back in their sports world and in
Yeah.
their in the past, and
Yep.
so now they kind of live through their sons, and they live or die on how their kid performs on the field, and I think that's misplaced. I think I think that's a dad who lost that drive in their own life. And what's my next goal? What's the next thing I'm pushing forward to? And so then they have to replace it with something. And then that's just pressure on a kid that is just trying to find themselves and trying to develop who they are. And I think it's really detrimental to that child, especially young boys, to have their dad dependent on them for their self-worth.
I preach, brother. I mean, so I growing up played all the sports, and then as got later into, fell into, I didn't fall into. Football was my sport. That's the
Mm,
thing that I love to do. That's what God had gifted me with so much. But I saw so many of my friends from early school to middle school that their dads were ones that just they lived vicariously through them. That their son was going to, they weren't able to play either college ball or professional ball, but their son was going to do it. They were going to push them, and they had heard about Tiger Woods and what Tiger Woods' dad has done, and they're just pushing, pushing,
mm,
pushing. And I can look now, and it's like every single one of them got out of sports
mm.
in late high school or early college, and they said, "I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with it." And I
Mm,
hate that. But I love that you pulled that out of like, "Hey, dads, okay, but so what advice would you have for a dad or a mom?" My wife played soccer, and
yeah.
our oldest has tried soccer, and it was a lot for her to sit there and keep her mouth shut. So
Yeah.
what advice would you have for parents? Let's talk about the athletics world just for a second.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for parents when they see potential in their kids, but they don't want to be that overbearing? I'm going to force you to do this. I'm going to live vicariously through you. How do we find some kind of middle ground there?
Yeah, it's tough because again, we live in a society where there's a lot of pressure around trying to, get our kids into the most elite position that we can.
Sure.
And you're talking about pay to play sports, club level travel. Um, and I think a lot of times when you look at soccer in particular, I'm a soccer guy.
Okay.
I played collegiate soccer and I never played on a travel club team.
Yeah.
You know, I played outside. I played with my friends. I played in community parks. I played anywhere I could where there was a pickup culture. And so I would say find that pickup culture as much as possible. Like we've lost a little bit of that like neighborhood play, but just playing ball in the backyard, and I think sometimes that needs to, if we can create that environment, that's really beneficial. It doesn't have to be the most, you know, private one-on-one
Sure.
elite sessions and all this kind of stuff. There's a place for that for sure. But I think we can be too aggressive too quickly in that space, and then the kids get burnt out. I saw it. You've got parents that are driving their kids 4 hours one way for a travel game. The kid remembers that drudgery of just ugh. And at a certain point, their passion for the game kind of gets burnt or gets watered down by all this other stuff that gets added onto it. So I would just say, you know, encourage and create an environment where they're able to explore different opportunities, and put them in those environments if they're ready for them and they really want to do it. But don't think that you have to be in those environments. And I think a lot of times the salesmanship is really big and
Yeah.
can kind of weigh on us psychologically where, well, so and so's parents have them in this club, and so we got to be in this club. And the reality is you don't. So
Yeah, I love that. Jeff Rancourt's got a fantastic podcast called The Pure Athlete, and he interviews all these folks on the professional level,
hmm
Hall of Fame folks, and their consistent message. If you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a great resource for parents with kids in sports. The consistent message is don't specialize, don't overdo it, let them be kids, let them play everything, let them get through puberty. A lot's going to change in puberty, and then let's allow some specialty come out
hmm
later in high school into college and allow them to find their groove.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really good. And there's another, it was a TED talk. I can't remember the name of the speaker, but he said something that stuck with me. So I want to credit him, but I just don't remember. He said something that stuck out to me so much. He said, parents, at the end of the game, when the game's over, your player gets in the car, there's only 6 words you need to say. Turn around, look at him and say, I love to watch you play.
Yeah, I love that.
Then take them to get some ice cream. That's all. That's all
Yeah,
that's all
yeah,
they need to hear.
yeah,
That's all they need to hear from you. They don't need critique. They don't need analysis. They don't need a breakdown. They don't need like that's the coach's job. I love to watch you play. That's what your child needs to know. That your joy comes not from their performance or how well they did. Your joy comes from the fact that they were out there and they were using their God-given talents and abilities, whatever level that is, and you enjoy watching them play. So that's the biggest thing that I've shared with, sports parents of teams that I've coached. It's just that's what you need to tell your kids. That's
yeah.
what if there's one thing that's going to keep them loving movement for their life, it's knowing that movement is something that brings joy.
Amen. Amen to that. So talk to us about you talked specifically to the men, but to parents in general about being active, about being able to play with your kids. I know you wrote a book.
Yeah.
Can talk to us a little bit more about your book. What is your book? And then I want to give a plug about how people find it later. But tell me about your book.
Yeah, so it's called Small Wins, Big Health. And the focus of it is me breaking down as a health professional the 10 biggest myths or problems that I see in the world of fitness and wellness.
Okay.
And
So
so,
give us one.
yeah, so one of them is that sleep is an afterthought. That sleep is something we kind of put as secondary, and I would say sleep is primary. And now a lot of the young parents in the audience are going, I realize
Yeah.
that very
Yeah. I
clearly.
got it.
But just seeing the long-term benefits of positive sleep habits and actually protecting and putting boundaries around your sleep.
Okay.
And I talk a lot about parents, give yourself a bedtime, right? Give yourself a bedtime because it's easy to think that, oh, this isn't my me time. But if your me time is sacrificing your long-term health, then you're burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
the book overall is really broken down to here's the problem, here's simple solutions, here's the things you can start doing tomorrow. Really simple. I don't know if you're familiar with Atomic Habits and
Yeah.
James,
Oh yeah.
but using that idea of habit stacking and understanding when it comes to our health and to our fitness and to our well-being, nutritional tips, all this kind of stuff. What are the simplest things that we can do that we can start to scaffold and build off of? Because the biggest problem that I see overall is this all or nothing mentality. And how many people approach their fitness as, okay, I'm gonna go do, something extreme. I'm gonna run a marathon, or I'm gonna do 75 hard, or I'm gonna do all these things, and they bite off more than they can chew, and then they feel like a failure, and then they get into this guilt spiral, and then that failure makes them kind of go into themselves and maybe even find new coping skills that are detrimental. And so the next
Sure.
time they think, I need to fix this, they're in a bigger deficit than they ever were. And if we continue that pattern, like that cycle is broken.
Yeah.
And so we've got to find a different model. And I think that this idea and approach of small wins, like finding the smallest thing that you can do that you can celebrate and then you can sustain and keeping on doing it over and over and over and over again, but not staying there, right? So repetition without repetition is what I talk about. You've got to have the reps, but then you've got to add.
Okay. I
Just like
like
in
that
the
a lot.
gym.
Yeah.
It's just like in the gym. If you just did 10-pound dumbbells for your chest press and that's all you did, you're never going to grow. You've got to have those reps, but you've got to increase something. You've got to
Yeah.
change some variable to make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more difficult. The problem is, the hard thing is finding where's the right amount of temperature change.
Yeah.
So staying away from the extremes, but finding what is actually sustainable that we can do. And so I kind of lay that out across all these different problem areas, both in terms of stress. What's your stress response system?
Okay.
Do you have an understanding of like how to actually relax? We know how to stress ourselves out, but do you actually know how to relax? Because a lot of the coping skills that we have or the coping mechanisms that we have are actually long-term detrimental. So I think about
Sure.
alcohol, right?
Sure.
Oh, I'm so stressed out, I need to drink. Do you understand what that's doing to your nervous system, to your sympathetic nervous system? Like this is actually contributing factor to cortisol and to elevated stress patterns and to poor sleep quality, on and on and on and on. It's inflammatory. It's, you know, high
Sure.
calories. There's so many
Yeah.
things that people aren't aware of because we gravitate towards what makes my brain feel good. But a lot of times what makes your brain feel good isn't always what's going to help your body long term.
Amen. So give us on the sleep, and you talk about sleep and stress.
Mm.
Obviously, parents, right? I mean, you're sleep deprived and you're stressed out. So talk to both of those. Give us some of those little wins. Give us some of the little micro habits that someone who's listening to this can say, I can take that one and I can start today. Let's talk about sleep first. What
Yeah.
what what do you offer advice there?
Yeah, so a couple of very simple things is digital detox. An hour before bed, shut off the electronic devices. It sounds crazy, and a lot of people are gonna be like, I'm not gonna do that. But the reality is, you're stimulating when you're supposed to be relaxing, right? So you're overly stimulated, your brain's going 100%, and you're not able to unwind. The other thing I would really recommend is, again, a consistent bedtime. Having a time that, like, this is when I'm going to try to go to sleep. Your body's going to operate a lot better. You're going to get into better sleep cycles. You're going to have better qualities of deep rest because your body knows what to expect.
Yeah.
Now, this is hard, when it comes to shift workers or folks that maybe have varying schedules and things, but for as much as possible, try to prioritize and protect that. The other thing I would say in terms of supplementation, one of the best things you can do, one of the easiest things you can do is magnesium glycinate, right?
Okay.
Magnesium glycinate. So it's also sometimes called biglycinate, glycinate. That's the kind of magnesium. So a lot of people take magnesium, but they don't pay attention to what kind. There's a bunch of different magnesiums, and they all have kind of different specific things that they do. But
Okay.
I would encourage magnesium glycinate. And again, this is something you can take with pretty much universally, regardless of medications that you're on. Obviously, if you have a specific medical condition, consult the doctor.
Sure.
But I highly, highly recommend magnesium glycinate, 200, 300 milligrams an hour before bed. This is an incredible relaxant, and it allows your mind to get into deep rest.
I
The
love
second
that.
thing is severely limit alcohol consumption. And this isn't a prohibition stance or
Sure.
anti-alcohol stance or anything, but the disruptive capability of sleep on your sleep is tremendous. So alcohol can help you go to sleep, similar to like melatonin, but it actually prevents you from getting into a deep sleep pattern.
Yeah.
The
That's
next one,
good. Fantastic. Please go ahead.
and the last one is caffeine. Paying attention to your caffeine intake. So we're a highly caffeinated culture. Caffeine is a great stimulant. It's perfectly safe, all these things. But a lot of people don't realize the half-life of caffeine is 8 hours. So that means that up until an 8 hour mark after you've had your last dose of caffeine, at least half of that caffeine is still active in your system, and it prevents at a cellular level, prevents you from getting into actual sleep, in terms of what your brain chemically understands as sleep. So if you're having caffeine at like 6 p.m., then it's going to be 8 hours from that before that caffeine has fully worn off in the effect that it's having on the quality of your sleep. So just paying attention to that, I recommend most people after 3 p.m. just try to avoid it.
Yeah, that late afternoon crash that everybody's trying to avoid. That it makes you think twice about pulling up some caffeine. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, because I mean, if the quality of your sleep improves, then the impact of that 3 p.m. crash is lessened.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So those are so many of those, right? You can start today. That it's
Hmm.
not. I don't have to start next week. I don't have to change a ton of things in my life. Okay, I'm going to put my phone up an hour before I go to bed. That's pretty easy. Most people are going to have a hard time with that. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to limit my alcohol or cut out my alcohol. It's just good for your overall health. The caffeine thing's easy. The magnesium. So tell me one more time. What's the specific type?
Yeah.
Magnesium
Magnesium glycinate.
glycinate. Okay,
Hmm.
taking
Yeah.
magnesium glycinate an hour before bed. Easy things we can do. Get better rest. Feel better during the day. Okay, so talk to us about stress. We look at our kids. We love them. They're a gift from God. But man, the amount of stress. It's like, okay, you're little bundles of joy, but you're also little bundles of stress providers. So what advice would you have for parents out there to hear this, to hear, somebody say, I'm going to help you eliminate stress or help you reduce your stress, and they
Hmm.
laugh. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah. You're the adult in the room, right? And so taking a hard look at that and going, yeah, I actually am a contributing factor to the stress that's existing in my family.
Yeah,
Um, and understanding the hardest place to be is playing the victim because it's very easy. That's the easiest way out. It's to say it's my kids, it's my circumstances, it's my environment. But that's super. Uh, I don't know the right term for it, but I want to empower you. I want you empowered to take some ownership over the stress factors that are in your life.
sure.
And so I think having some stress tools in your toolkit. So I have a toolkit, like a stress toolkit that I give to people. Um, where's your stress even coming from? Have you ever broken it down? Like, have you actually analyzed, is this emotional stress, physical, physiological, physical, mental? Like where's the stress coming from? Once you know where the bulk of your stress is coming from, then you can begin to think through, how could I minimize stress in that category? So if your stress is primarily environmental, it's where you live, your location, your the noise, pollution, all these different kinds of things. Um, there's some factor within there that you can change. So it might be that long term you need to find a different job, right? It might be long term you're looking for maybe a better living situation. It's important to have that consideration in mind. Now, that's not like immediate solutions. That's more
Sure.
long term, big picture. What is going to bring the most peace into my home, into my family, in terms of what are those trade-offs? But the stress can also be things that are more immediate. Again, just thinking about things that we're contributing, that are playing contributing factor roles. We think about the food that we're eating. Is that food actually? It feels like that junk food. It feels like that food is allowing you to unwind. But what's it doing to you long term internally? Similarly, we can think about all the different things that when we think about our stress system, we think about cortisol, right?
Okay.
We think about, oh, my cortisol is really high. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want cortisol to go up. That's what's going to get you awake and up and moving and motivated and driven. The thing is, though, during the afternoons and evenings, we want that cortisol to come down.
Yeah.
So if we're eating a lot of high processed sugary foods, that's going to play a contributing factor. If we're stressing ourselves out by playing things over. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you have a cortisol spike because of stress, that only lasts in your system about 60 to 90 seconds. So if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're really angry, that response is going to dissipate in about 60 seconds. But what do?
Yeah.
We
We
replay it.
play it on loop. Yeah.
We loop it and we loop it and we loop it and we loop it. And so we're driving that cortisol up, 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 up. And your brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain doesn't know the difference between something that happened 10 years ago or something that happened 10 minutes ago or something that happened 10 seconds ago. Because if you replay it, and I'm sure your audience could sit here right now and think of something someone said in middle school to them, that
Sure.
if they think about it, it makes them angry
Yeah.
and it gets them heated. We could all play those things. But do you have, I talk about taking control, taking your thoughts captive.
Yeah.
Do you stop those thoughts and that loop? Are you aware of that loop happening internally? Because that's just cortisol and stress that has no benefit to your life at all. It provides nothing of value, but your body's going to respond to it just as if you were in a life or death situation. So finding those little moments of where I can take back some control, whether it's in my thoughts, my environment, whether it's in the food that I'm eating, protecting my sleep, so understanding what is called your parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
This is you have our sympathetic nervous system, which is what creates and produces cortisol. But then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the inverse. This is the part of our system you've heard of, fight or flight.
Yeah.
So think about that as your sympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system is rest and digest.
Okay.
Okay. Try being super stressed out and then eating. Your digestive system is not going to do very well in that moment, right? You're not going to be like processing. This is why you probably don't want to finish a hard workout and then like sit down and eat a whole meal, right? You're going to let your system come down and then you're going to eat. Your body cannot process correctly in terms of digestion when you're stressed.
Okay.
You have to learn how to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So rest and digest. Do you actually have stress reducing activities in your normal day to day? Do you know what those things are? Do you have them like booked? Do you have activities that you know this helps me unwind? And it's not this helps me unwind and it's going to long term have a negative impact. This helps me unwind and I know that it's good for me overall.
Yeah. I love that.
So some examples is just like taking a simple like 5 minute walk, sitting on the floor and doing some stretches, taking a bath, anything that allows your nervous system to just chill out. Even 5 to 10 minutes, a couple of times a day, can have a really big impact on your overall system, particularly when you're thinking about in the evenings. You can integrate this in even with toddlers. Okay? Think about like bath time with your toddler, right? Think about that. Like for most people, that's a time where all of a sudden all that noise kind of comes
Yeah.
down. And it's intimate. We need those moments even as adults. So can we build them into our time with our family? Can we build them in as time as individuals? Because you need that for yourself solo as well. And this isn't something you should feel guilty about. This isn't something you should feel shame about. Like, oh, I can't believe I need 5 minutes to myself. You need 5 minutes to yourself.
Yeah.
But you need to protect it. You need to put boundaries around it. And you say, no, this is something that I do. And making sure that everyone in your family understands this is why and this is the value, but in giving them space to do the same.
I love that. I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. And I love this idea of, can I show up better?
Hmm.
Am I showing up stressed out? Am I showing up sleep deprived? Am I showing up in a way that is not as healthy for my family? Or can I take a few minutes and then show up better?
Hmm.
That me showing up for longer, worse, is not actually better if I take a little bit of time away and have some time to process, have some time to reset, and then come back into the conversation or come back into the relationship with your kids in a healthier place. Is so much better, so much better for you, so much better for them, and it's healthier long term. Well, Brian, man, I appreciate your time very much. Where can we find your book?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. Small Wins, Big Health, and so it's available there. Printed copy, the ebook is there as well, audiobook. which AI audio. So
Oh, nice.
that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so that's available there on Amazon. And then if anybody's interested in a copy, they can buy from me directly as well.
Cool.
And that's on my website, holyfitcoaching.com. And I'd be happy to sign that and ship it out personally. So,
Very cool. Well, I appreciate that very much. Well, let's close on this question. This is one I love to get from guests. What's a piece of advice if you could go back 10 years ago? If you could speak to younger Bryan, what's a piece of advice you would share with him?
hmm. I would put less emphasis on education
Okay.
in terms of the formal context, and I would put more emphasis on skill development.
I
I,
love that.
I think, I went the college degree, the master's route, and I'm not using either of those degrees now at all.
Uh,
So, and I don't regret it. That definitely shaped me in a lot of ways in some pivotal years. Um, but I think there was some skills in terms of now I do a lot with technology. I do a lot with, on the podcasting space and YouTube and these kind of like I would go back and I would spend more time learning editing software and things like that
sure.
than maybe some of the stuff that I studied for my degrees. So that would be something I would glean.
I appreciate that. That's good feedback, and it's good for everybody to hear that, right? I mean, if you're considering looking ahead at 10 years, it's an important reminder
Mm.
for you to focus on building up your skill set. Sometimes that's through education. Sometimes that's through taking a random class at the Civic Center and learning a new skill. And so I love what you said earlier. You want your kids specifically, but for as a business owner, you want your employees, you want your spouse, but think about it as a parent, you want your kids to have somebody to aspire to.
Mm.
And that's the example that we're getting to set. Well, brother, I appreciate you. I appreciate the way that you're serving the community. Appreciate the way you're serving the Iron Forums community and the way that you're leading your family. Thank you again, everybody, for pulling up a seat and at the family table. We'll see you soon. Thank you for pulling up a chair at the family table. We hope today's conversation has strengthened the bonds that hold us together. Don't forget to follow the show to keep these heartwarming stories coming your way. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with friends and family. And if there's someone whose family story you think would be a perfect fit for the show, drop their name in the comments. We would love to hear from you and bring more families to the table. Until next time, cherish those moments with your loved ones.